Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Jan Wasowicz to our speaker schedule today. And so without any further ado, Jan, I'm going to have you forward the slide so I can talk about ASHA CEUs. If you can hear me okay, just go ahead and hit the raise a hand button on the left side of your screen so I know that I'm coming through. Awesome. Okay, thanks, everybody. Let me just do instructions here quick, and then I'll turn it over to Jan. We're going to submit as Pearson completed CE forms to ASHA if you attend the entire 60 minutes of the live session today, and we'll confirm that through our ReadyTalk service to make sure that everybody's been on the whole time. And you have to complete the attendance sheet only if you have more than one person at your site. You also, of course, have to complete the ASHA participant form and the evaluation form per ASHA guidelines. This is the big date. Everybody write this down. April 25th, a week from today, you have to have your forms in the mail and postmarked to the address you see on the screen, Darlene's address at our San Antonio office, 4/25/18. Those are the dates. So we can't submit if we don't have those postmarked by that date. If you send your CE forms by fax or email, we can't take them. ASHA won't allow that. Or our partial credit CE forms are not available. So please follow all the directions to get your ASHA CEUs. I know that's important to everybody. So April 25th, postmark date. Thanks. Okay, great. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jan and have her begin to tell us all about her topic today.
Okay, great. And I'm not sure if I need to read the disclosure form, but there it is up on the screen. And I want to say hello to everyone today and thank you for being with us. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to meet with you today. I'm going to be looking at, today we're going to be looking at a comprehensive framework for identification and treatment of dyslexia, and specifically looking at an intervention program that can be used in the identification and treatment of dyslexia, and really look at how it fits into the whole scope and the whole process. And as the title said, after the screening, there's work to be done. Clearly, and as you know, there is a lot of work to be done after the screening in order for us to achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve for all students. So as you know, many states, most states, either are or very soon will be mandating universal screening for all students in order to identify students who are at risk for reading and writing problems, and specifically to identify students who are at risk for dyslexia. Typically, after the screening, and well, before we talk about after the screening, some of the screening tools that are included in the Pearson Toolkit for Dyslexia are listed here. And the goal here is to screen the students, and through the universal screening, collect data that can be used about making informed decisions about the intervention and progress monitoring to follow. So typically, the next step within a multi-tiered support system, RTI model, response to intervention model, the next step after the screening would be to take those students who are identified at risk for language-based reading and writing problems, specifically dyslexia, and begin to get them involved and enrolled in some supplemental instruction. And along the way with that intervention, do progress monitoring to monitor these students very closely and identify which students need more intensive intervention, need a modification to their intervention plan. And I'm going to talk about that intervention and progress monitoring in a minute as we go forward. And that's all very important, the intervention progress monitoring, to help us further look at, to identify those students who truly do have dyslexia versus students who maybe have something we might call dyslexia or some other reason. Perhaps they come from a print poor environment. And so by putting them into this intervention, we can help to identify those students who need further intervention. But at some point along that way of intervention and progress monitoring, we're going to get those students who clearly are not responding to intervention. And so we'll need to go into the diagnostic assessment. This is a step where we're going to dig deeper in order to understand in which specific areas is the student struggling, so that we can make more refined and data-based decisions for our interventions and our continued progress monitoring along the way. And this is especially important for these students who do have dyslexia, because we need to intervene early, and we also need to intervene in a very targeted way. We know that they are going to need a lot of intervention. We know it's a lifelong process for them, learning process, and so the earlier we can intervene and also the more precisely we can intervene, the better. So the diagnostic assessment is an important step here. And here are some of the tools that are included in the Pearson Toolkit for Dyslexia that could be used as part of this diagnostic assessment. And they collect a variety of data. And I have a chart up here that helps us see in summary form the types of information, the types of data that you'll be collecting with those assessments. So if we look under symptoms of difficulty, we see different skills listed here that are typically going to be a challenge for students with dyslexia. If we look at underlying correlates or processes, we see that these areas are typically an area of challenge for students with dyslexia. And also if we look at risk factors, we can identify certain risk factors for, we do know certain risk factors for dyslexia, so we can look there. And again, the different tests that you select during the diagnostic assessment and administer will provide information in these various areas. In the second column, I just want to call your attention to the areas that are specifically flagged by the International Dyslexia Association as being key indicators for dyslexia. That doesn't mean that none of these others are. In fact, we know they are, but these are flagged by IDA as key indicators. And so as part of your diagnostic assessment, you'll be gathering more information in these different areas to help identify, are they scoring below average, average, high average, and also looking at which areas they score low, because we know there are different subtypes of dyslexia, and we know we want to look at the different profiles, again, to help us make database decisions so we can refine our intervention and help the students in greater effort by focusing where they need it. Now, before I go on and talk further, I want to talk about some limitations you will have with the standardized assessment data. Depending on which assessment tool you select, some are more general, and by their very nature, a standardized test tends to be more general. So you may not get the specific information you need for intervention. Again, depending on the assessment tool, you'll get more or less. And I want to point out just as a few examples of areas where you may need to dig deeper. So first of all, reading fluency. I want to mention this because this is often a point of confusion. We know that reading fluency is a very, very strong diagnostic indicator. However, it isn't helpful for intervention because, in fact, we know that we don't want to specifically target reading fluency, and by that I mean our goal isn't, or our focus of instruction isn't reading fluency per se, but rather it's working on the underlying deficits that are interfering with reading fluency. And I like to give the analogy of when my red light indicator comes on in my car, my engine indicator, I don't take my, it's a good indicator something's wrong with my engine, but I don't take my car to the mechanic to ask him to fix the red light indicator. Rather, I ask him to look under the hood and identify what's the problem. So that's what we need to do, is we need to look further under the hood to identify where to provide the intervention. And then just as one other example, so a student may be weak in word reading or spelling, and a dyslexic individual oftentimes is weak in both of these areas. But depending on the diagnostic assessment you gave, you may or may not have detailed enough intervention. So for example, we might know a student is weak in spelling or reading, but do we know on what types of words? Single syllable, multi-syllable. Do we know on which patterns? Short vowel A, inflectional suffixes. And so we want to take a closer look. And so one tool that you could use to help dig down even deeper in your diagnostic assessment, and again, very critical for these students with dyslexia, is to use a diagnostic assessment that will really dig deep into those linguistic underpinnings that we know through neuroscience research, through behavioral research. We know that these linguistic underpinnings are deficit in students with dyslexia, as well as other language-based reading and writing problems. And so when we look at these different areas in great detail, we can then have the data we need to put together an intervention plan that is tailored specifically for the student. And as just an example of what this might look like, by the way, spelling error analysis is one of the best ways to look at a student's underlying deficits in those linguistic underpinnings. The reason being is that spelling is a much more stringent measure of what a student knows or doesn't know. We know, and we've all seen students on our own caseload, that a student who can read, quote unquote, read well, but yet can't spell. And the reason, there are lots of reasons that are beyond the scope of today, but we know that we need to, that if we look at spelling, it will help us more precisely, have a more sensitive measure that will pick up those underlying linguistic deficits that may be missed by looking at reading only. So that's one reason to look at spelling. We also know that spelling as a path to intervention is a powerful way to improve both spelling and reading, whereas programs or methods that focus just on the reading or the decoding, if they're good and if they're administered well, will improve the decoding but not transfer over to the spelling. So just as one example here, we have a student, Ethan, and the print might be small on your screen, but I'll walk you through here.